Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here at Catholic Table Talk Podcast. This is the podcast where everything Catholic is on the table once again for this week, episode 116. Thank you all again for joining me again this week. Like you have been so many weeks. Greatly appreciate it. If you're new to the show, welcome. Glad to have you on board. Like, comment, subscribe, and share the show and give to the show. If you don't know which channel we are on, please look down the description box below and you can find all of our platforms that we are on. So go check us out on all the platforms. And of course, like I said, share the show with friends and family to help spread the word. If you have a show topic or a speaker request, if you'd like to come on the show, or your merchandise, more information on sponsorship, please email us at catholictt@gmail.com. It's Catholic with two T's at gmail.com, the official email of Catholic Table Talk Podcast. And like I said, I try to look at it daily, so I don't miss anyone's requests. Today's episode is brought to us by Dr. Katrina Nguyen. Dr. Nguyen is a physician and medical doctor. How she can help you, your family, and your community out at mdkatrina.com. Also, she can be found at mycatholicdoctor.com as well. On to today's show. Without further ado, we've been kind of having a kind of two-part series, been kind of going back and forth. And this, I like it because this hasn't really been happening on purpose. This is kind of by, I feel like, the Holy Spirit. So kind of the one side of the series, we've been kind of going about how to rest easy and just take more life more enjoyable. The other kind of part of the series is more we're discussing books, and we'll have another book on discussion today. It's called 52 Masses by Daniel Markham, and I talked to Daniel before the show today, and again he reached out to me. He wanted me on the show. I was more than pleased to have him on. He's from Ohio, and he traveled the country and wrote a book on it called 52 Masses. You can follow him on Instagram at 52 Masses as well. So without further ado, let's welcome Daniel Markham to the podcast. So Daniel, thank you again for taking the time to come on the show and talk about your book.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome. Yeah. And like I said, I talked to you on the phone before today, and we are on air, and I really found it really interesting why you wrote the book and on your road trip across the country. And so I basically I'm gonna ask you the same question that I asked you on the phone, is what made you want to write a book on your road trip, and how did the road trip all started?
Back in 2016, I was driving home from dropping my youngest son off at high school soccer practice. He attended a Catholic high school in Michigan City, Indiana. We used to live in Northwest Indiana, Diocese of Gary, and I was reminded of a little parish that my oldest son and I had attended mass at. It was Our Lady of the Dunes. It's actually located in the Indiana Dunes National Park. Beautiful little church. And it was built in part by Lithuanian immigrants, and they would have a mass in Lithuanian every third Sunday. And my oldest son loved to go to mass in foreign languages. That's his interest is language and culture and the world. So we went on a couple of occasions there, as well as other places that offered foreign language masses as he was growing up. And I was just reminded of this, and just all of a sudden, kind of this idea flooded over me of attending mass in all 50 states and the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, and that's 52, and I could do it in a year. And then, I could write about something at each parish I visited, because I'm a writer by trade. So that was, I'm always thinking, hey, I could write. And by the time I got home that evening, that afternoon from dropping him off, the whole idea for the book was basically in my head. It was, I would go and I would write about something taking place there, whether it's a ministry or an effort at evangelization, education, an individual story, the mass itself, the history of the parish. The idea was all the different ways we're living our faith as Catholics. Whether that's the mass and all that we get from it, and as we are fulfilled by the Eucharist and everything, all the beauty of the mass, but also then what we then can take out and and affect the outside world with, with the gifts that we've been given by Christ, how we serve Christ, in all different ways, our communities, our individuals, spreading the word, just our Catholic life. And I just, that was the original idea. And initially, I think I thought it was my idea. And when I started reaching out, it was about 2 years later, I said, okay, I targeted 2021 to do the book because that's when my youngest son would be out of high school. So I didn't want to go on the road while he was still in school. So I targeted 2021 to do it. And so about 2018, I said, now's the time. I really need to figure out where I'm going to go. And I started basically just sending emails to every parish in the country that had an email address. I would go on a diocese website. I'd get all the email addresses for each parish. I'd send out this form letter that said, this is what I'm doing. I'm writing this book. I had the blessing of my bishop. I had the blessing of my pastor. And I said, if you have something in your parish that you think would make a good addition to the book, then let me know. And that way I would be getting parishes that wanted to be participating in it. And also I got so many great suggestions that I never would have come up with on my own, if I was just trying to pick something and go. Now I did do some of that where I needed to. There were some stories that I wanted to write. I went to a military base. I wasn't going to get that without. I reached out to the archdiocese and military, and they said, I was like, what states are you looking at? And I said, well, I need something in South Dakota. So they sent me to the Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. And so some of them I would pick if I didn't have something, but others I would get from the people who responded to me. And it was actually in the responses that to me, the whole thing kind of changed. As I said, I've been writing professionally my entire adult life. I mean, that's all I've done. And so I had this sense that this was something I could do. This type of story was kind of what I'd specialized in during my professional career. And so I thought this I could do. But when I started getting responses, not particularly when people would call me on the phone, not so much, most of the responses were by email, as you would guess, because I reached out by email, but some people would call me on the phone, and it was the conversations I was having on the phone. And I would hear the passion. I would hear the love. I would hear how much their parish or their pastor or this ministry they were involved in, how much it meant to them, and how, and just how they were filled with this Holy Spirit because of their involvement, or because of just how their, the holiness of their pastor, whatever the case. When I started to get that feeling, when I started to understand the depth of that love for the church, I started to understand that this wasn't something I could do. This was something I was supposed to be doing. That this was ultimately, what I was called to do was to, to use my gifts, which as a writer, and tell their stories, and hopefully, I at the same time I realized, I obviously this had to be the best thing I ever did, because it's the first time I'd ever, I had specifically written something for the faith. And the other thing that I think that kind of dawned on me as I was starting to understand what it was that I was being called to do, was that in order for me to most effectively tell the stories that I was doing, I was confident I could tell the story at the Air Force Base, or Father Father Scott, and who's a pilot in Alaska that I flew with. That was just, I knew I could tell those stories and do a good job of it, but I wasn't, sure how well I could do it telling my own story, my own faith journey, that I felt like in order for the book to really do what I felt like, it needed to do, that I had to, while I was telling their stories, make it clear to others how much the entire experience was affecting me, affecting my, my relationship with Christ, my faith, my understanding of all that the church is and offers, and that's a work in progress, as it is for all of us. But I felt like in order to tell this story the right way, that had to be evident through it, is that this didn't just, I'm not just this dispassionate observer, writing on them, but this whole experience of going out and sharing the Eucharist with these people was having a profound effect on me. And it had an effect on me before I even made my first trip. I mean, it was, I could feel that myself, that, this is already, affecting me and causing me to grow in my faith, from the very first trip, or even before that.
Sure. And I would like to just kind of throw this, really has been kind of still in my mind through, and the whole time that you're speaking here, Daniel, is, you start, I mean, that must have been a lot of work, to sending emails out to every parish and all the great ideas, like you said, that you got back. I guess my question is like, how much time did you spend writing emails and going back and forth with different parishes? And was there like a certain starting point that you want to do? Like, okay, I kind of want to go to this state and start and push,
Yeah, it took about 6 months overall of just kind of like, I would sit down in the evening. It just so happened my wife was staying close to her parents at the time, and I was with my son, and we were just seeing each other on weekends. So I had all this free time because, I had a teenage son. He didn't really want to spend his time with his dad. So I had all this free time in the evenings, and I would just kind of gathering up the email addresses. The sending the emails was really actually pretty quick, happened pretty quick. It was the bounce backs when I had the wrong email address, and then I would try to figure out which one it was. That actually took a lot more time. But the original idea was it would start on January 1st, or the first weekend of January, and go through December 25th. That was, or go through the Christmas Mass. And I initially planned to start in Hawaii, because that made the most sense logistically. If I took my family out to Hawaii for Christmas, we go to Mass, and then I would come home, and then I would have it would be a little bit easier than trying to jam a Hawaii trip into the middle of a week. So that was the original plan, but obviously COVID, kind of laughed at that. So then what happened was, in June of 2021, or, a little earlier than that, when it looked like, the vaccines had come out, some of the restrictions were being lifted at some parishes. When that started to happen, I reached out to my publisher. I said, I'm just going to get started, because I had already been doing a lot of the interviews. After I chose where I was going, I talked to people on the phone to interview them, because I didn't know that they would be there when I was there for Mass. So I had to do a lot of the legwork beforehand, as well as, it was easier for my work job to spread the work out. Sure. So I didn't want to get too far away from when I had talked to some of these people, because some of them, it dated all the way back to 2019 when I started the interviews. So I just said, I'm just going to get going as soon as I can, and I'm going to go where I can, because there's still a lot of uncertainty there. So I ended up, like, I would go to a vigil Mass somewhere, and then a Sunday Mass the next day, if it were nearby. So that's actually the first weekend. I was in New Hampshire for the vigil Mass, and then I went to Connecticut for Sunday Mass, and then I came home. So I had to be a lot more flexible, which obviously we all did during COVID. And but that was kind of neat, because it really like that I remember that very first weekend, and I heard three different priests gave 3 different homilies on the gospel reading, and I was, my eyes were like, wow, I never, because I go to one Mass a weekend, like most people, right? I go to, I go to one Sunday Mass, and to hear 3 different perspectives, all totally valid, but all taking a different aspect of the gospel reading and expanding on it and focusing on it, and it was just this aha, wow, there's so much in each gospel reading that we can explore, that we can consider, we can pray over, that it was a real it was a real blessing to have that so early on and realize, wow, there's so much to learn, because you hear one voice. I mean, even if you're priest changing, sometimes your deacon gives your homily, you're still only hearing one perspective on that gospel reading on a Sunday, and by the time, it kind of comes around next year, you've probably forgotten what was said. So, to have this 3 in succession, perspectives, all of them valid, all of them, based, on a deep understanding of Scripture, but all different and all, different in their perspective and different in their presentation. And it was really neat way to kick things off that way, because it truly demonstrated how much I was going to learn along the way, because and I think that was the biggest surprise, was how much I learned about so many different things while I was traveling, and that was a one of many blessings.
Yeah. And that sticks with you. I mean, you remember, hey, I know there's three different homilies, and that really sticks with you. So
yeah.
And that's, like you say, that's a great way to kick it off. So I mean, that's a great thing that you liked about it. And I would like to say you had to be flexible, and listen, you don't really want to have too much of a workload, and like you said, some of the people might not be there when you were there. So like, I mean, those are great things that you talked about that you liked. Was there anything that you didn't like, or should I say nothing? Something that was like, this could be a little bit better.
The only disappointments were things that maybe because of scheduling, I didn't get to fully experience. One that jumps out the most was there was a kind of a miscommunication between me and Deacon Robert Curtis in Maine. In Maine, I wrote about the prison ministry, and if I had, it was probably if I had been more clear, and understood his schedule, I could have gone with him into the prison to pray with the men who were incarcerated, and I really truly wanted to do that. That was just something that truly appealed to me. In fact, I would love to get involved in it, down the line, but because of different schedules, and a previous engagement I had while I was out in Maine, I wasn't able to do that. So that would mostly be, I mean, a couple of speeding tickets, but other than actually not too far from you in Minnesota, I got a speeding ticket. But no, there was very little, that would only be, it was those things that maybe if I had more time, that I could have done a little more. It would have been the only, real disappointment, because even things like, there was a very funny story, I'll kind of be brief on it. There was this, I had to change plans on the fly, and I had to get a second hotel room for a night in Mississippi. And so I was kind of frustrated about that. So I got like, all right, what's the cheapest hotel room I could find? And it was, in fact, the cheapest hotel room you could find. It was just awful. It was gross. I had to bring sheets in to lay on top of them because I didn't, it was just that kind of that bad. And the next day I went to mass, and a father was talking about how the Pharisees were mocking the disciples because they were eating with their hands, and it was unclean. And Christ says, only that which is inside of us can make us unclean. And I immediately thought back to the night before, when I was, complaining about this hotel room. And I thought, okay, all right, okay, I got it. I got the message. You don't have to hit me over the head with it. But again, even then, in a situation like that, as well as when I kind of thought back to the speeding thing I got in Minnesota, which was very early on, I thought it dawned on me, wait a minute, this isn't necessarily supposed to be easy. I'm not supposed to have, a worry-free, trouble-free trip just because I'm doing this. I mean, you reflect on all of the people in the church's history who have suffered, up to, many great hardships up to and including death, in their service of the Lord. Then, a cruddy hotel room in Mississippi is really not a lot
Right.
that to worry about. And that was one of those, important lessons to, like, hey, just, it's not going to necessarily all going to be easy. You're going to have things that go wrong, and you're going to have to deal with that. And, and put your faith in Christ to that, ultimately, you're here doing this for a reason, and things will work out. And, so that was it, the things that ended up being unpleasant, you quickly learn, especially when you talk to such, and meet such inspiring people, that, those are blessings as well. And it's how we react to them. So I think, I think everything that happened ultimately was a blessing, because I could learn from it. I could see the bright side of it. I could just, pray over it. And when, when you begin to take that attitude in everything, the effect it has on your outlook, on the sense of peace that you live with is staggering. And that was probably the most, the thing that I think when I came home and continued till today, is just how much at peace I now am as a result of doing this, because it changed me, and it changed, just a lot of things that I thought were probably unchangeable, and for the better. I mean, I just feel like a different person,
Awesome.
and more patient, more understanding, more, less prone to anger, than I was before. And there's no mystery as to what the cause of that is.
Right. No, I mean, that's great. And like you said, I mean, it really changed you. And like you said, you felt like you were called to do this. And
Yeah.
you mentioned that you kind of wish you had more time, but I'm sure most everyone who's listening right now could wish they have the time to do that too. So it was for the purpose for sure. Um,
Yeah, I think that everyone can do something. It
right,
doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be traveling all over the country. I that's what I was called to do. But I think, the we can all do what we can to grow in our faith. We can all, ultimately, be there to listen to what we're being called. I think that's most important. The most important thing I could, share with someone is, Christ is asking something, is calling all of us in some way, whether it's to serve in a ministry, whether it's to, to be the best husband or father you could be, whether it's religious life, whatever you are being called to do, is to answer that call, to say yes to that call. And it has amazing, profound effects on your life when you do.
absolutely. And it's not easy. It's not always easy to hear say
No,
yes,
it's
but
not.
it's the thing is to do it. So
Yeah,
absolutely. So we got about 5 minutes here left, Daniel, and this is kind of time to talk about your book. Why should people get it? What is like one chapter, that you really like or that people might enjoy, and where can they buy the book at?
Okay, so I think what I hope to accomplish with the book, very briefly, was I hope that I would tell a picture of who we are as a Catholic people,
Right.
and that was the primary thing. I also hope that maybe people who are maybe weaker in the faith, or who haven't yet been introduced to the faith, maybe they can be inspired by one of these stories and realize there's an avenue into the faith through through these other regular people, because that's what they are. I mean, they're not they're just people like you and I who are just doing really uh, 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 great work for the church. I also hope maybe that some people who are already strong in the faith, like yourself, maybe you see it and you say, hey, that's something we need at our parish, or that's a ministry we need in our diocese. So I hope maybe people like almost use it like a cookbook and say, hey, that's something I could do better, or we can do better, or and so to use, to be inspired that way, to then maybe it's just, hey, I'd love to get involved in that, because that would really, that's something I could do. So I hope that's the kind of the three main things from from that people can then can take away from it. Because I do think our church is it's the universal church. It has so much that it offers all of us in our communities. And I hope that above all that, people aren't really, if and when they read it, they see all of the beauty that exists in our church and in the people who are serving it. And so that's, that would be you asked, what story, I think I'm always surprised that when people will say, "Oh, I like that one. I really like," because it'd be one that I would not have guessed. For me, it would have been Bakersfield, California. They, I was there to write about their shrine to the unborn, which is primarily for women who have lost children in miscarriage. And the women I met in Bakersfield, it's a primarily it's a parish primarily of Mexican immigrants, first, second, third generation Mexican immigrants, just truly devout families that populate the parish. The women who I met, who are involved in this ministry of various ministries for serving those families who have lost a child in miscarriage, were they were the closest things to saints I'm ever going to find on earth. And I was so blessed to have been able to talk to them and to hear their stories and to share that a little bit. I hope I did them justice. But that one, it was nice. It was because it was California, and I was actually driving back from Arizona after that, but I had a lot of time to reflect on my experience there. And that was one of the actually nice things, was all that time in the car to reflect on the people that I had met. And that one was particularly special because it's, a lot of cases, the farther away I got, the more I appreciated all that I had just experienced. And so that was definitely one of them. As for where you can get the book, you can get it, probably the easiest way is through my website. It's not, you can't get it on my website, but if you go to my website, you can, there's a link to the Square site. You can just, it's right on the homepage. But my website is 52masses.com. And if you get a copy, you can get hardback, paperback, or signed paperback if you were so inclined. And it is also available on Amazon, but I tend to direct people to my site.
Absolutely.
Because you have the option on the signing is not available if you would go through Amazon, because they send them out themselves. But so it's just 52masses.com. And right there on the homepage will direct you there. And That's probably
Awesome.
the book is 52 Masses, and I'm Daniel Markham.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll have your website in the description box below, Daniel, so people can go right to it from after the show.
Oh,
So
that's wonderful. Thank you.
no problem. And thank you again, Daniel, for coming on the show, talking about the book. Real pleasure having you on. And you are welcome back anytime. We'd love to have you back on.
I would love to come back on. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I there's any number of things that I can discuss, experiences I had, because there was just
Too much
there
for one show.
so many there were so many.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So
All right.
thank you again, Daniel, for coming on. That's Daniel Markham, everyone. Again, 52masses.com. Go check out in the description box below. And we'll see you next week on Catholic Table Talk Podcast. This is the podcast where everything Catholic is on the table.